Welcome into another edition of the Husker247 Podcast. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Bruntz, Brian Christopherson, here during Nebraska's second bye week. We'll start with this right off the bat. How do you guys feel about two bye weeks in the same season? That it really only happens if Nebraska plays a week 0 game. Normally, there's just one bye week, but now there's been two the last couple years. How do you guys like it? What do you think of it?
I think it's beautiful. I mean, I love Bruntz might have a different answer. That'd be good. That's good radio. People like when you spar, right? But no, I think it allows me to watch football games that okay, here's an example. Alabama, Tennessee, I was aware we're playing a humdinger of a game, but it wasn't going to be until Tuesday that I was going to get my eyes on it and kind of see how it unfolded, because you're just kind of caught up in covering what you're covering and you see highlights here and there, but it's stuff like that you miss out on. And also just, it's going to be a beautiful fall weekend here in Nebraska. And I'm going to go pick some apples out in Nebraska City. And I mean, why the stink wouldn't I enjoy two of those weekends? So yeah, go counterpoint, Bruntz.
I think real quick though, I have a follow-up question. Are you a cider guy?
Yeah, I like cider.
Bruntz, do you like cider? I knew Bruntz was out on cider. I knew it in my heart of hearts. Bruntz is completely out on cider. So I figured we'd get that in there right away. All right, Bruntz, what do you think about the second bye week?
Well, I think we need 0 bye weeks. They should play all the way through. It should be Junction Boys football, but no, I mean, I think I appreciate 2 byes. I think the pumpkin patch proprietors in Nebraska appreciate 2 byes. And in addition to the reasons that Brian laid out, it kind of divides the season up kind of nicely. You've got the first stretch of games. You got a nice little middle here. You got a week to recover from the 2 road trips, and then it's a sprint to the finish. So I don't hate the 2.
All right. Look at that. They agreed amicably. We just didn't talk about cider, which made it, I guess, okay. So there's that. I didn't see it because I wasn't probably paying enough attention on Twitter before the game. Does Purdue still do the branded hot dogs? Is that still their thing? There was no branded hot dogs?
It was a boxed lunch with ham on croissant.
Oh, wow. What are they, Kansas?
And
Kansas
no branded
had the worst of everywhere I've ever gone. The worst pregame meal was Kansas, where someone threw together a sandwich that was the saddest piece of lettuce or arugula that I've ever seen. A third of a strip of Kraft cheese that they had just ripped off on a bun, not even just a full-size bun, just a cocktail bun. And they charge you $9 a person for that, and a Keebler Elf cookie and an apple.
Back, you're a little young, but back when Kansas was good,
I saw them in 2009. They were just coming off of good.
No, this is when they were really giving it to Nebraska with regularity, and especially on basketball is different. But I remember back in the day, you would they would do full Chipotle burritos, this big.
Yeah,
and that was before Chipotle was on every block in America, and that was always kind of a big deal. I thought it was a bit like if somebody did a Torchy's situation, it was a little rare back then. So
was that basketball only, or was that basketball football? Because I was talking about football.
I think I had a Chipotle burrito at a Kansas football game.
You just didn't bring it in your pocket?
Which is a little bit like Fitted Hat Day at Yankee Stadium, because you got a lot of toppings in there, and it was good. But I know the sandwich of which you speak. Missouri used to do the same thing, where it was they got you for $10 for basically a bologna sandwich.
Yeah. PC, do you have thoughts on this? Do you want us to just move on?
I don't have any great thoughts. No, the best one.
You've ate the most best meals out of anybody here.
Yeah. Kansas State would sometimes have a great press meal. They had I'm not saying it was steak, but they had something that was pretty good high up, like some top level, like farmers brought in their stuff. And I remember that one year that K-State was pretty good. Now, they were probably hit or miss. Texas Tech was really good press food once in a while, I think. And that's where my memory ends.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if either of you were going to bring up the Penn State potluck.
Well,
yeah.
From what Brian was describing, it sounds like it was a Penn State situation, which is sneaky good on the potluck.
I thought Colorado in 2019 with the meatloaf was pretty good. I was like weirdly excited to have meatloaf in the press box. I don't know why.
That's also one of 2 press boxes where you get a post-game beer, but don't tell anybody. Just keep it here.
No one listens, so we should be good. We should be good. All right. Nobody cares about the press food. Nebraska lost to Purdue. I keep getting the score wrong, I think, as I say it. 43-37. Is that right?
That's right.
Is that how it finished up?
Nailed it.
43-37. Bit of a track meet. Nebraska had to fight back from double-digit deficits a few different times throughout that game. You guys were there. You saw it unfold. What are your sort of initial thoughts thinking back to that game now a few days removed from it? We'll start with Brian.
Well, I mean, Trey Palmer was the guy who made it a fascinating game, because without him, I felt like Nebraska was working around their offensive line sort of, but we've got this guy who, if you just give our QB 3 seconds, he's going to run past him, and that's going to be something fun. And, you kind of sensed it on the first drive of the second half that it was teetering in that point where, are we watching a game where Nebraska's trying to save face on the scoreboard a little bit, and this is a 51-24 kind of game, or is this a real down to the wire thing? And once again, they came out of the half, and the defense even got their act together for a couple series. And I felt like that's where Nebraska missed an opportunity, especially when it was 27-20. Not only the Alante Brown miss that everybody thinks of where they had to settle for a field goal, but on the drive before, Palmer, actually, the only play he had that was bad all game, he dropped one across the middle that would have got it to about the 40 and got the drive rolling. And that was after, I think, Casey missed him, where Trey had broke free from the guy by like 5 yards, and Casey shot it out of bounds quite a ways. And that could have frankly been a touchdown right there. So there were these little parts in the game like that where you kind of look back and you're like, even though it looked up statistically like Purdue kind of had the thing, it had a grip on it, there's like 3 or 4 moments where it was there to be seized by Nebraska, and they just didn't quite capitalize in those moments.
Bruntz, obviously the press box view affords you the ability to kind of see the full field in a way that the television broadcast won't. Was Trey Palmer just legitimately that open all game long? Like, could it look like they were rolling a safety and it didn't matter? He was just running by guys. I mean, he was just literally that open all game on just straight go routes. Like, they weren't even like double moves. It didn't feel like they were just him running, either wheel routes or go routes and just being open.
I think Purdue at one point tried to really get physical with him at the line and jam him a little bit, and he was still getting a free release. I mean, it was I was trying to think of a game that you would kind of compare that to. Like it was almost like Teran Petaway back when he would just start making threes from like half court. Like he would just walk up and just, shoot it, and that was it. And that was just an amazing individual performance. And I mean, if they could have gotten a little bit more protection for Casey Thompson, I mean, he probably could have named his number in that game. I mean, that's just how good he was. And, Mickey Joseph said after the game, they knew that Purdue did not have anybody that could run with Trey Palmer. I think Trey Palmer is starting to figure out the Big Ten a little bit, which helps. But, going forward, I mean, you've got a pretty good example of how to not cover Trey Palmer, and 4 really good defenses coming up. So I'll be curious to see how things change for him. But I mean, that was like Namir Abdullah just, blacking out and just, doing everything yourself kind of a game. I mean, it was pretty darn impressive.
When you flip it over to the defensive side of the ball, Brian, Nebraska did not have Luke Reimer. the entire game. Did that feel noticeable before Nick Henrich went out, or did that become even bigger when you were playing two backup linebackers in the third and fourth quarter?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was noticeable, and then when you're looking out there and it's young Ernest Hausman, who we all like, but is like growing in as he's walking through the fire, you know, and then Malga Clements, who does some good things, but he's there's a difference, there's a gap, I think, between Henrich, Reimer, and the rest. And I saw Henrich coming off the field. This isn't breaking news by any stretch, but he was on crutches. That looks bad. It looked bad.
It looked bad on TV too.
And then Trev Alberts on the radio even last night was sort of speaking about Nick as leading from the sideline sort of thing. So you can kind of guess where that one is going, which is really unfortunate. But this is a deal where they've got a month now where some of these young guys who are going to be a part of this thing, and you almost hesitate to say that in this day of college football, right? Because you don't know who's coming back, who's not. But Ernest Hausman's going to be around. Malcolm Hartzog seems like a guy who's around for the long haul. There's these individual guys who are popping up. Marquise Buford, who I don't know how much he got dinged or if there was some benching going on there too. Phelan Sanford played a lot for him, but Buford's a big part of it. Those guys, you need to have a really useful month. And I know you wrote about it on the site, Schaefer, about it's not just one guy, one coach, one magic answer who can save this. And so within that conversation, you are talking about those type of players really developing through these game experiences and it being something useful for them now and in the future to really help this program. So that's what you're hoping for. But yeah, the defense in that game was they were off their feet, I felt like, through most of it. They had a pretty good third quarter. And then on some of those, you got to just say Aidan O'Connell is a very good college quarterback, and especially working with a healthy Charlie Jones. They did about what they've done to about everybody this year. So we can pick at that. But I thought Quinton Newsome actually covered okay for a lot of the game, and the guy still ended up with 130 yards.
Charlie Jones is really good. I mean, without knowing every coverage concept or whatever they were trying to do, I mean, some of it is just individual guys are just really tough to stop. And, when he's been healthy this year, he did that to pretty good Penn State and Syracuse teams. And so he's a guy that is going to be problematic for whoever Purdue plays in the Big Ten. And they look good. Like I know they only won by 6 against Nebraska, and they gave up all those yards to Trey Palmer. But given the other teams in the Big Ten West that they have to defeat, like I think Purdue's got a real chance of representing this division as a Big Ten West winner. Where do you guys come out on that?
Yeah, I could see that. I'm curious without knowing what's left for schedules, Illinois, I think, has the kind of defense and running game that can keep it in some games. Going back to Nebraska's defense, I mean, the thing that was a little bit surprising to me was you defended 101 plays. You didn't have one sack. Like, I don't think Nebraska was even credited with a quarterback hurry in that game, which I know that
there was what, like two times where it looked like Ty Robinson or Garrett Nelson or O'Shawn Mathis had a hand on him, 2 or 3 times, and it just didn't matter. I mean, he got out of it, and it never really felt like they were going to get a sack, to your point.
Yeah, well, it felt a little bit like early season defense where it was much more on your heels. I thought Purdue's the passing game is one thing, but what was concerning to me was with the ease with which Purdue ran the ball. I mean, you have a redshirt freshman walk-on running back that, looked like Jim Brown at times out there. That's a concern to me. And, obviously Nebraska is going to have to defend the run pretty well going forward, but I was a little like, I could understand Purdue chucking the ball around the yard on Nebraska, but the concerning thing to me was the way they ran the ball, even though, that we had talked going into that game that Purdue's kind of won games in that fashion where if they've had to bully teams, they've been able to do that.
Yeah, Devin Mockabee turned out to be a pretty good player. Nebraska's tackling turned out to be pretty bad on Saturday, and it was everybody. Like there wasn't a single guy who could look at anyone else and be like, "Oh yeah, I made a one-on-one tackle and didn't get destroyed here," because basically in every one-on-one situation, it didn't go Nebraska's way. All right, let's move off of the game specifically and just talk about Mickey, Nebraska's interim head coach, Mickey Joseph. I am starting to feel more and more that he is going to remove, or Trev Alberts will remove that interim tag when Nebraska ends up making a decision in late November, early December. I think he's still, Nebraska still has to win a few more games. Like it's just not a done deal right now, but it seems more and more to me that he's been able to put his stamp on what he wants this program to be. That Trev Alberts is watching him as he's sort of building it and doing it without the staff that he'll likely have going forward. And doing it with, kind of a mismatch of resources and talent when you take over a program halfway through. What do you guys think of that read? I mean, are you at the point where if you had to say someone was a favorite for this job, would you say it's Mickey Joseph, or do you think it's still the field? Because I'm taking Mickey over the field right now on October 19th, and that can absolutely change. But as things sit here on Wednesday during the bye week, I am expecting Mickey Joseph to be Nebraska's full-time head coach in December.
My feed cut off. You said he will be, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, my expectation is that he will be. For, like I said, it's October 19th. They still got to win more games, but that's my expectation.
That's a good question. Mickey or the field? Man, That's a good question.
That's where I'm at with it. Like maybe I'm way over.
I think I'd still take the field slightly, but so I'll take.
There's more people in the field.
I'll take there is. So you would think, but Mickey, I liked how the line he had recently, and he's like, I got the best interview of everybody. I'm on the scene. I'm on the job right now. He said that at one of the press conferences, and that is very useful. He's also meeting with Trev Alberts every Sunday at 1:00. And those are opportunities to talk about, where do you see this? What would you do with this? You can talk more extensively, and it's not just a cram session, although Trev's got plenty of time to interview other guys or get their thoughts on things. But Bruntz and I were talking about this on the car ride home before and after stopping at the world's largest truck stop in, where's that?
Walcott.
Yeah, Walcott. We got a few items there.
What were the items? Did you get a racing jacket?
Big old belt buckle.
Nice.
Yeah, people who have been there will know what we're talking about. But Mickey, the thing we were talking about is Mickey's really got to, like everybody else, like what does his staff look like? I'm wondering, if I'm Trev, I'm wondering like, okay, how are you moving the parts? Who are you bringing in? What's this look like, and how do you envision this? And so that's an interesting part of it. And it goes back to what you wrote again, Schaefer. It's that not one guy thing. You got to know who are the coordinators attached with all these coaches, who are the main recruiting guys that are attached with all these guys, and how does it all fit together? But as far as just like handling the head coaching spot, not getting caught up chasing rabbits, as we always talk about, and just kind of dialed in and handles the media pretty well. I know it's early on and it's kind of a honeymoon period right now with Mickey and the media in the state, but he does really well at that. And his personality, fans just like it. Like my mom sent me a tweet or a text of Mickey skipping down the sideline after the missed field goal. She's like, how can you not love this passion? So my mom's like turning pro Mickey. I do sense some of this with the fan base right now.
If you were going to break it down by demographics, I'm pretty sure parents of people in their 30s are all in on Mickey because my dad won't stop talking about him. So they should just make him the coach now. I don't know if the bar is just so low that just having someone that you seem to enjoy on the sideline is pretty much all that some Nebraska fans want, but that's how it feels at this point.
Bruntz has a thought.
I would still go field. I think I have little doubt that Mickey's staff, whatever it looks like, and I think you would see a very dramatic overhaul with what's there now. big changeover. But I have little doubt that they would recruit well. And, I think the question that Trev Alberts has to get to is, how does he see this job? I mean, Mickey's only a few games into his head coaching career. He's still very much learning on the job. The thing we don't know yet is, what kind of interest is this job generating nationally? I feel like this time around, this should be a more attractive job than what it's been in the past. I just think you need.
Isn't that weird to say?
What's that?
Isn't that weird to say? They're coming off of 5, potentially 6 straight losing seasons, and it feels more attractive because the barometer has never been, like the standard is fairly low that someone would have to meet compared to when you fire Bo Pelini and you're basically looking for the guy who's going to put you in the BCS or college football playoff conversation at that time.
Like, I think you have more runway this time around. I think the fact that there's not like at least as of now, I know maybe Mickey becomes that, but there's not like an obvious, like, okay, this is the guy that everybody in the fan base wants, like it was with Scott Frost, where, that kind of made things a little bit difficult. But I think it's just too early, because I think, as great as Mickey's been, and he has, done a really nice job of keeping everybody pulling in the same direction, I think you need to see some results on the field. I mean, if they go in and, let's say they beat a couple teams that have, really kind of had their way with Nebraska in the past, I could see
that's literally everyone left on the schedule, by the way.
Well, yeah, but I mean, especially if it's Wisconsin and Iowa too. I mean,
right.
Which, strangely enough, those two teams would probably be more winnable right now, or feel more winnable than Illinois. So I think that's where the clamor gets a little louder. But I think we're still a little early on the me going against the field. I'm still going with the field now.
It's the safest thing to say right now. Mickey could have played himself out by now. Like, he could have played himself out of the conversation, and he definitely hasn't done that. And I agree with Bruntz at the end, the point he's making about, you're going to come out of this bye, you're going to have a kind of a banged up defense still. I mean, you're probably without Henrich and some guys, and you're going to have to – Illinois soaring high. They think the West is theirs. Then you got Minnesota, who's a little banged up, hasn't met expectations. But you got those 2 games at home. I'm not saying you got to win both, but you got to be in both, and you probably got to win one, I think. I don't know. You got to make a statement there, because I've said all along in this process, as far as it concerned Mickey Joseph, you got to make your statement on the front end. Like, people sometimes will say, well, what if you beat Iowa or this or that? By the time you get to Iowa, there's another guy you've already, like, you're probably pretty far in a relationship with someone else, I would guess, if you don't think Mickey's the guy. So I'm saying this first half of his coaching job, the first 5 or so games, are actually the most critical and sort of setting that tone. Like, you got to beat out Mickey. And I think Illinois, Minnesota is the biggest statement opportunity of all. So, if he rolls through those 2, and we're talking about a 5-4 team or something, and they knocked Illinois off their pedestal, then I would agree with you, Schaefer. I would favor him over the field at that point. But right now, I still kind of aim field. But he's kept it interesting, and I do think they're going to be in every game except Michigan. I think Michigan's a real problem, and I'm kind of ducking for cover for that one. But the other 4, I know Illinois is playing well, but I think Nebraska with Palmer will make some plays, and I think all these games are going to be down to the last 5 minutes. I really think that's what we're setting up for.
Yeah, and I think with that, you get the opportunity to see how he handles, late game coaching. I mean, I feel like he had to have done some things right on the sideline against Purdue, because that game could have gotten away from Nebraska multiple different times. And, maybe it was just fortuitous that you have Trey Palmer, and Trey Palmer is good enough to kind of keep you in that game. But it still took, good special teams. It still took good, good play here or there from other individual performers. And I I feel like when you have the kind of seasons that Nebraska's been coming off, it would have been easy for them to just roll over in West Lafayette at night. You're down by 10, and they didn't. And I don't want to make that seem like that's enough, but I just feel like we're seeing, at least with Mickey at this point in time, like the job is not too big for him. He can be a head coach. I really do think like through 4 games, we've answered at least that initial question. Like I can easily see him being a head coach in college football. Now, is it Nebraska or not? I don't know. But right now, like I said, I just feel like if I had to put money on one of those 2 things, I would bet on Mickey right now over the field. But obviously, there's still a lot left. And if you go, 0-5 over these next 5 games, it answers itself. You're probably not hiring them. But if they split those games against Illinois and Minnesota, it's going to get really loud again. And coming off of that Michigan game, those final 2 games, one at home against Wisconsin and one against Iowa. I mean, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota have never seemed more beatable than this season, certainly as a trio. So I think Nebraska's going to have some opportunity, but they have to win them. It can't just be another round of, well, hey, they hung in there. So they got to go out and add some wins to the schedule too. All right. We kind of hit on Mickey. We hit on what's next for Nebraska. I know that you guys weren't able to watch a lot of football when you're on the road, when you're covering like you were with the Purdue game. But are either of you, like, what is your level of surprise with what Illinois and Brett Bielema is doing right now? Like because that's Nebraska's next opponent. Nebraska last, faced them week 0 of 2021, which feels like it was 15 years ago instead of just being 15 months ago or whatever it is. And I'm just kind of curious, what do you make of this Illinois team and how quickly Brett Bielema has kind of turned them into like the sort of Wisconsin teams that we were used to seeing?
I'm surprised because it's Illinois. But when you really start to dig in with what they have the number 1 defense in the country. Like when you have that, you can win some games, and they play smart football. It's running game, it's defense. They've got a quarterback now that I feel like it is kind of similar to some of those quarterbacks that he had at Wisconsin, where it's not somebody that's like lights out, going to go light the scoreboard up, but is going to play smart, isn't going to make a ton of mistakes, and is just going to kind of keep things on schedule. And, I think in some ways too, that's kind of what he tried to do at Arkansas and wasn't able to replicate it. He went out and hired an offensive coordinator that had been with him at Arkansas, but basically had kind of kicked their butt at UTSA last year. And, it's a balanced offense. And when you play defense, it's easy to win close games like that. And, with the Big Ten West being what it is too, it's kind of coming together at the right time for them. I mean, I don't know that there's a truly elite team in the West right now. So, I think that makes a ton of sense. I mean, the thing that's kind of confusing to me about them is how they lost to Indiana. I mean, that's going to be the one that's going to hurt them. But, they're a solid team. And, for Nebraska having the issues that they do with their offensive line, I mean, I think Illinois has the ability to probably give them a lot of problems.
Yeah, I mean, and Chase Brown is just a special player. So you combine that with, as Bruntz is speaking about their defense, you got one of the best running backs in the country, and there you go. In the Big Ten, that's enough to get a lot of mileage out of. So I do think it'll be interesting. They've started to deal with sort of being the hunted a little bit this last week. Like I think this game, like the game against Minnesota was an example where they had to play with that target a little bit, and they own Minnesota. And I know Morgan got hurt in that, but if you look at the yardage, it was like 400 something to 180 or so, something like that. It wasn't a close game. They own that thing. I do wonder if they've got a slip up or that kind of head scratching game still in them, because whenever there's that sort of team who's sort of finding itself for that first year, there does seem to be that game in like late October, early November, where you kind of, someone looks at their scoreboard, they're like, oh, that happened, They came down to earth. So that's what you're hoping for if you're Nebraska, that you get healthy during the bye. And even though Illinois is having a great season, you're going against a program that's not used to being the dominant favorite. And so that's a new role Illinois is playing as they come into Lincoln, and it'll be interesting how they handle it.
Absolutely. Let's dive over into recruiting a little bit. Malachi Coleman makes his decision on Saturday. The talented wide receiver linebacker from Lincoln East, finishing up his senior year. They have Gretna on Friday. They should make the playoffs. I think right now, the way that it sits, they will, even if they're not able to knock off Zane Flores and undefeated Gretna. Malachi Coleman did not really cut his list down. He's got the top 7 that he's had for a while. He didn't make any other official visits. Nebraska is the only official visit that he made. I would say about twice a week he has a tweet that's just a picture of him and Mickey Joseph. Is this as academic as a decision day in October could be? I mean, is there any surprise that's out here, Michael Bruntz?
You never say never. However, I think a good rule of thumb generally in recruiting is you follow the visits. And Malachi Coleman was at, three Nebraska games so far this fall?
Yep.
And games where, maybe he wasn't expected to go and then kind of showed up late or still made it in the stadium. So obviously that Mickey Joseph relationship is huge, as we all know. So I think Nebraska stands in a pretty good place heading into Saturday. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Brian, I mean, Nebraska's wide receiver situation, you have Trey Palmer, and he's been really, really good. And now there's a chance potentially he leaves for the NFL after one season. Nebraska needs a lot of wide receivers. Like, they just don't. It's remarkable to me every year you bring in these different classes, you bring in different players. I mean, it's basically Trey Palmer, Marcus Washington, Oliver Martin, right? Like that's pretty much all we're talking about with Nebraska's wide receivers. A little Alante Brown, but we haven't seen anything from the class of 2021. The class of 2022, I mean, Dakota's Crawford got hurt, and we haven't seen Bonner, though I believe Mickey Joseph talked about him a little bit. It feels like this is a position Nebraska can never get settled. Adding a guy like Malachi Coleman and Omarion Miller will give you some talent to develop, and you look to see what you can get with Barry Jackson, Jaden Doss. But how many cycles do you think we are away from Nebraska kind of stabilizing a position that's just been a mess for them?
That could somewhat relate to just Mickey's status within the program. I mean, I think if Mickey is in this program in any way next year, I think it will sort of settle itself down. Hopefully you get Crawford back from injury. And I think they were kind of excited about what he was doing prior to that. Bonner, they still feel really good about. He's a young guy that no one should cancel out. He made the road trip recently, and he's just a little behind like 4 or 5 guys, and they're in these tight games, so that's why you're not seeing him. But he's on the fringe, like he's starting to at least show signs. You can't say the same about some other guys, though. In what we're talking about with Malachi Coleman, that's actually beneficial, because you're with some of these recruits, they're going to look at it and be like, the door's open, and Mickey, with his track record, has also shown he'll play young guys in certain spots. And they're showing it on other parts of the roster. Heck, I mean, throwing Malcolm Hartzog out there, and you can even use that as an example, I think, with the receiver. It'd be like when Mickey's in charge or Mickey's making decisions, he's not afraid to play some of these guys. And so I think I expect Malachi to go Nebraska's way. I think there's NIL possibilities here for him, families here. There's a lot of good situation. And it was said earlier in this podcast, with Mickey, if Mickey were the guy, they're gonna recruit pretty well. I think that's a given. And so if you feel good about Mickey handling sort of all that, just like the role of being a head coach and all the extras that go with it, there's a nice case to be made there. With that combination, if he's hiring the right staff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so Malachi Coleman, that decision will be on Saturday. We'll have plenty of coverage with the fallout of that and whatever he chooses. So I think all of us have crystal balls in for Nebraska and have for quite some time now. So I don't think there's any late change coming from any of the three of us. We'll see if anything happens over the next couple days. Elsewhere in recruiting, it's just quiet right now. I mean, Nebraska, I wrote about this. It's up on the site. I won't run through the whole thing, but Nebraska still very much needs to go out and find another offensive tackle in this class, and they would like that to, I think, be a high school guy more than trying to find another portal person, because they're going to look for portal offensive linemen regardless of position and just try to add depth to the roster after the season is over. But offensive tackle is a big one. Ryan Robinson, another name to keep an eye on, defensive back out of Louisiana, another guy that if Mickey Joseph ends up with this job, it wouldn't be a surprise if Ryan Robinson ends up committing as well. But otherwise, pretty quiet recruiting-wise. Mason Goldman picked up an offer from Gretna here last week. Still trying to nail this down a little bit. In Nebraska's initial recruitment of him, and when I say initial, everything leading up into about a week before the offer, all they had talked to him about was defensive line, defensive tackle. And so maybe they're looking at him on the offensive side of the ball. Every other team that's offered Mason Goldman, including, Arizona State, Kansas, et cetera, they're all looking at him as an offensive lineman. So that one will be interesting. And don't discount the idea that he might look elsewhere simply because of how it went with Zane Flores in Nebraska too. I've heard that from some people that have had conversations with Mason Goldman as well. So a lot still obviously going on recruiting-wise, and we'll certainly have it for you at Husker247. Anything you guys want to add before we close up shop here today?
No, I think we covered it. That's everything.
Bruntz is done, BC?
No, I said all I need to say. So
okay. Everyone is tired of talking to you during the bye week, so we're going to go ahead and end this. But we'll have plenty of content at Husker247. We'll have stuff on the coaching search. We'll have stuff on Malachi Coleman. We'll have stuff on the football team. There'll be some superlatives about how things have gone for the first 7 weeks. All that stuff that you can find at Husker247. So be sure to check that out. And, of course, we'll be back with more podcast content as Nebraska gets going into another game week when they take on Illinois to finish out October. So be sure to tune in to Husker247. We'll be back with another podcast next week.